Is this a mortuary or a brothel? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today what we're doing is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a recommendation from you guys, a horror movie that I've never seen before, something that you recommend in the comments to one of my videos. I check it out for the first time, and then I let you guys know, is it syllabus-worthy? Is there something about it that makes it worthy of being on the horror movie syllabus? And today, the movie that we're looking at is Love Me Deadly. And Love Me Deadly was recommended to us by Sarah, my friend, the Rose Bride, as she's known in the comments. And Sarah recommended this one twice, technically. She recommended this in our taboo horror video, where she said that it was a little bit more of a tamer, thoughtful taboo horror movie. But she also referenced it in a comment on our Central Europe video, where we talked about horror from Central Europe, and in particular we were talking about the movie Necromantic, and she had said that this movie was a little bit more palatable than Necromantic in terms of subject matter and content. And this is what she gave me, this is what I had to go on. Based on this, had a little bit of an idea of what kind of taboo it was going to be, but that was it. I didn't look up any trailers, I didn't look up any reviews, or until after I watched the movie. I went in as blind as I could, knowing just what Sarah had told me. And did I love it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is Love Me Deadly. Love Me Deadly came out in 1972 and was directed by Jacques Lacerte. And if you don't recognize that name, that makes some sense, because Jacques Lacerte isn't really a feature film director. From what I understand, he was a theater teacher, and for some reason was given the reins to this movie as an inexperienced director, probably for cost-saving reasons, maybe because he had the idea. I'm a little unclear as to why he was given the money and reins to do this movie, and it is apparently the only movie he's done, the only feature film movie, based on what my research showed, that he's done. So, take for that what it will, but the movie is what we're here to talk about, not the director, and we're going to get into that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a woman who frequents funerals of people she doesn't know because she is sexually attracted to dead bodies. She is a necrophiliac, and she is exploring this side of herself in a way that is, kind of dipping her toes in the water. And she comes across some like-minded people that might be able to help her further explore this taboo interest of hers. But what would that do to her quest to find a husband? How will she ever find a husband with this taboo affliction? Hijinks abound, and we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie. And this movie is one that, I'm spoiling it, I guess, just a little bit by mentioning that it's about necrophilia, but I feel like there's a little bit more you need to know going into this movie to really prepare yourself for what you're about to get, because the movie is a taboo movie. And it's from 1972. Now, 1972, the 70s, we start to get really taboo stuff there. They really start to push the boundaries in the 70s, but it's early 70s. So it's coming out from the 60s, and it's coming out from the time period where, some of these things weren't necessarily touched on quite so candidly or in your face. And it's a credit to this movie that it is boldly exploring this taboo subject of necrophilia. It is handling it rather tastefully, surprisingly, considering it's kind of a lurid and obscene interest or subject to explore. And I feel like they're doing it in a pretty good way, but they're doing it boldly. They're doing it, they're not shying away from the subject matter. They're not shying away from taboo stuff at all, really, in this movie. Like, right from the start, you're coming up with some stuff that, especially by today's standards, from a modern viewpoint, from a lens of a 2025 person's viewpoint, there's a lot of taboo stuff that's being thrown in here. Casual drug use, sexual assault, sexual harassment. There's, prostitution, homosexuality. There's some things in here that even by today's standards, maybe are kind of hot button issues, but especially in the 1970s, some definitely hot button issues there. And then they're just putting them right there on screen for you right off the bat. The movie's starting out with this kind of stuff. And then it's going into necrophilia and also some other taboo stuff that we're going to get into in a little bit there. But it's starting out not pulling punches. It really is leaning into the seediness of its subject matter and the premise in a way that I think is kind of alluring, kind of interesting, kind of drawing you in. They have this woman who's exploring this taboo desire of hers, and then she comes across this, for lack of a better word, necrophiliac cult that also indulges in this kind of extracurricular activity. And it's a really interesting and bold place to go for this movie. Right from the start, we see this mortician who she befriends, basically luring in prostitutes, gay hustlers, to their deaths to basically exploit their bodies like this. And early on in the movie, it starts out with this live embalming scene where he's got this gay hustler strapped to a table, an embalming table, and he is embalming him while he is still alive. It is a pretty shocking and disturbing scene right from the get-go, and it happens early in the movie, and I was shocked. I was really surprised and kind of enthused by this. Like, wow, this movie's really going there. This movie is definitely going to be taboo and edgy and not pull its punches, but still handling the subject matter pretty sensitively. The idea of a woman who is necrophiliac is taboo, and it is kind of lurid and exploitative in nature, but the way they decide to focus on her in her personality and her relationships is interesting. It's a little more nuanced. They are exploring how this affliction she has, for lack of a better word, this condition, is affecting her personal relationships, right? The impact it has on her lovers, right? Her male suitors, because with them, she's very frigid and cold. She's a kind of sexually dysfunctional. She can't really get into it with them. She needs to have the dead body as part of her kink, if you will. Nothing else does it for her, and it's affecting her relationships. And of course, she can't be honest with them and tell them why she's so frigid with them. But then she meets this mortician and his group of friends, and she can be a little bit more free with them. It's an interesting story to kind of follow, and it's interesting to establish this kind of necrophiliac community that is really kind of understanding, and the people seem relatively nice, murder aside. They seem like, welcoming, supportive people. And we don't really spend enough time with them, frankly, to get a fuller picture of what they're about, which is an unfortunate drawback for the movie, because it's interesting. These characters are interesting. This mortician is interesting, and how they approach her and the way they try to coax her out of her shell and get her to embrace this part of herself is weirdly kind of heartwarming and sweet, but it's also really messed up, right? So this movie's presenting you some stuff that is really shocking and offends the sensibilities, but at the same time presenting it in a way to almost to say as if this is more nuanced and more complex than you think. There's a lot more behind this than you would think about, and you shouldn't just write it off as like gross and worthy of damnation. That's an interesting take. I was really into this right off the bat, and then on top of it, there's this extra layer where the woman is fascinated with, or has an obsession over, her deceased father. And there's like this aspect where she seems to be kind of attracted to men that look like her father, which hints at some really disturbing, potentially incestuous stuff. At the very minimum, it's hinting at some sort of past trauma in her life that maybe explains some of what she's going through now, but also maybe it doesn't, right? And the movie's setting up all this really interesting stuff to explore, and then it gets sidetracked by her love interests. And I can't stress this enough, because it's really important that this movie at one point basically stops focusing on necrophiliac woman and turns into kind of a romantic drama. We have this love interest of hers, played by Christopher Stone, who, horror fans will know, and he and she have no chemistry really, It's really awkward. He's very rough with her and stuff like that. And he kind of wants what he wants from her, and he can't get it from her because she's not interested in him because he's alive. And then she winds up kind of dating him, it seems, but then kind of just swaps him out for Lyle Waggoner, who shows up halfway through the movie as a love interest, just randomly as this art dealer. And suddenly, like, she's going on double dates with Lyle Waggoner, and then Chris Stone is dating some other woman, and they're just kind of like swapped partners. And then she's in love with Lyle Waggoner, and then they're getting married. And all this is happening in like the span of like 10 minutes. Like, and even in terms of the story, like, it seems like they've met and like fallen in love in like a week. But it's hard to tell because so much of their meeting and so much of the dialogue surrounding how they connect is just covered up by the soundtrack, the music, which is weird. It's weird, but there's a reason for it. And I found this out when I explored the movie more in terms of like research and stuff after I watched it. And according to the producers, the dialogue in the movie was so bad. The dialogue written by Jacques Lessert, the director who also wrote it. It was so bad that it was basically unusable. And their way of getting around this was to overlay music and crank the music up and literally just make it kind of like almost like a music montage, except that it's a whole shot, a whole scene where you just don't hear any dialogue. It's pretty wild and it's pretty jarring. Like, you have this nonsensical switch of love interest like halfway through the movie. It just switches and you don't even understand why. Like, you see the scene where she meets Lyle Waggoner and she's with Christopher Stone when she meets him, and Christopher Stone kind of gets annoyed and starts hitting on some other girl while this guy's obviously picking up his girlfriend in front of him, and you have no idea why because you can't hear a single thing being said. It's super strange. It's a weird decision, and apparently it was a producer decision, not a director decision, but it was based on the director slash writer doing a poor job of delivering a good script that had good dialogue, and on top of that, getting a good performance or getting good right line deliveries out of his actors, which is okay. It's understandable. You've hired a guy who's not a director to direct it. That's kind of your fault, and this is your way of papering over it, and it hurts the movie in two ways. One is because I don't understand this relationship, and two, because it's taking me away from the stuff that's interesting in the movie. You're sidetracking me with this movie about suddenly this woman trying to find a husband or trying to find love and trying to make this relationship work, which the underlying reasons for why the relationship doesn't work is interesting, but that's not really what they're focusing on at this point in the movie. And it goes this way for like a good 20-30 minutes, like just goes off in these other relationships. And like I said, there's no chemistry with Christopher Stone, and Lyle Waggoner's a little bit better in terms of the chemistry, but the real problem with both of these relationships is the lead actress, Mary Charlotte Wilcox, who is not great in this movie. She's not a good actor. She's very pretty, and she's there for being hot and some sexiness, but she's very wooden and flat and dull. She's a very bland performance, and as a result, the relationship drama is very bland and dull as well. We don't get a lot of charisma from her, and so we're not really invested in her relationships. And for me, I just kind of want to get back to the creepy necrophilia stuff because that's the interesting stuff. That's the different stuff. This lame 70s relationship drama stuff is boring. You know, I don't really care if Lyle Waggoner stays with her or not. I don't care if they work out their relationship. I don't care that he's mad that she's frigid. None of it matters, all I mentioned. God bless Lyle Waggoner. He's doing his best to try to make it work. But first, he's playing off of an actress that's not really giving him much to work with. And second, like, it's just, there's not much in the script there. It's not a lot of meat on the bone to deal with that. Eventually, the movie does get back on track, and we start to get back onto our focus of this because, you know, her husband is starting to get curious about where she goes. She's lying to him, and he knows she's lying to him, and like, why is she going to this mortuary and stuff, and he starts investigating into it. So we kind of get back into the plot, and back after like a really long diversion, we get back into it, and this is where it starts cooking again for me, because even early on, like I said, we had like so the taboo stuff right up front, boldly going into this necrophilia the subject and exploring it, and yet when it came to our lead actress, our heroine, the scenes, the necrophilic scenes were very tame. It would be like she'd go in there to the funeral, and after everybody left, she'd go up to the casket and she'd start kissing the corpse, right? It's kind of just, you know, just a little bit seedy, a little bit edgy, but not really exploitative. And you know, almost to its detriment, really. You kind of wanted to see it be a little bit more lurid than that. Well, towards the end of the movie, you get more of that. You get to see the the necrocult in their full glory. You get to see her full on going for the necrophiliac experience with the corpse, and it really doesn't pull the punch. And it's like I'm right back in this movie. I'm right back into this sordid, seedy, taboo movie that's going there, that's not pulling its punches. And I'm just annoyed that I had to wait for 25, 30 minutes while Lyle Wagner figured out what was going on for us to get back to where we're at. And then it has an ending that is interesting. I'm not sure if I like the ending or not, but I do think that it's an interesting ending. I think that they're doing something kind of, uh, they're trying to do something or take a message out of it that I think it works. I think it might have been better if they had set this up a little bit more throughout the entire movie, or really just kind of stayed focused on what they were staying focused on. It should have been staying focused on, rather than taking this romantic diversion, or just even weave the two things together so it didn't feel kind of like one story stop, another story stop, and then a resolution. Like, if you could have just worked this together, balance it out a little bit more, so that these two stories, like, kind of interwove a little bit more. Like the whole idea that she's having relationship problems because she's a necrophiliac, very interesting stuff. But they're not weaving it in enough for that to be captivating. Instead, it just feels like silly relationship drama where the husband's annoyed at the wife because she won't put out, and that's just not doing it for me. It's not. But then when you get to the necrophiliac stuff, when you get to the sordid taboo stuff, when you get to the hints at incest and stuff like that, the really weird stuff, the creepy dancing on the father's grave, stuff like that, then I'm in. I'm very much in. But this is kind of a weird mixed bag. Two different movies almost. Well, does that make it syllabus worthy? Let's find out. So, is Love Me Deadly syllabus worthy? No, no, it's going to miss the mark this time. It's unfortunate because it's really got a strong premise, a strong concept, and it's got some really high points to it. But the uneven tone and then the bad dialogue and the bad acting really, really hurt it. I mean, there's a whole chunk of the movie that I was just taken out of the movie. I was just like, "What the hell am I watching at this point?" And I was actually kind of getting a little annoyed by it. It really did. It just stopped working for me at some point, like about 30 minutes or so in. It just stops. And then Lyle Wagner shows up out of nowhere, and there's like basically no explanation for it, because this whole thing that the producer did with like using the music to mask it over, which, by the way, the music is kind of odd. It's like this odd, sappy musical choice, which for the drama part, the relationship drama stuff, makes perfect sense. It feels like a 70s relationship drama music cue, but it's used throughout the movie. So like for some of the creepier necro scenes and stuff, weird music choice. So that, a side note, that I didn't love the music for this so much, but the sidetrack into relationship drama really, really undercuts the effectiveness of this movie. Now, I have to agree with Sarah. She's right. This is a much more thoughtful and nuanced and interesting take on necrophilia than we've seen in movies like, say, Necromantic. I'd say, arguably, this movie's better than Necromantic in a number of ways, even though Necromantic was more exploitative, more gory, more in your face. This is definitely a less exploitative version of something like that, of this kind of subject matter, to its benefit for the most part. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more balance, or maybe just a little bit more sordidness. The movie starts out with this promise of a sordid, skeezy, sleazy movie, and then it doesn't deliver on that promise. It goes in an entirely different direction for a long while, and then at the end, kind of does come back and give you a little bit more of what it was promising you at the beginning. I'd say that, while I don't know about the very end of the movie, I'd say the final act of the movie does kind of save the movie for me. Like, if it had just stayed with the relationship stuff throughout the rest of the running time, I would have very much disliked this movie. The coming back towards the end, where it gets into a little bit more crazy, sordid, campy stuff, like the grave dancing and the necrophiliac orgy and the people in their robes and stuff like that. That's where it starts to get back into what I kind of wanted to do, which is a lighter exploitation movie than necrophilia, than necromantic, but less love story, frankly, in this movie, and more love and corpses, I guess, is what I wanted from it. It didn't necessarily need to be super gross and super sordid, but it needed to match the energy that it was bringing at the very beginning of the movie, like the first act, because that was the energy I was feeling. And then in that second act, it really started to lose me. Third act kind of made up for it. And not for nothing, this movie doesn't really have much of a pedigree. Like, there's not a whole lot of buzz about it, people talking about it a lot. It got a small release when it came out. It doesn't really have a whole lot of notoriety or anything like that. Honestly, I feel like this movie would be ripe for a remake. Again, the concept is really cool. This idea of this woman whose necrophiliac tendencies hurts her ability to love. If you play this a little bit more tongue in cheek, made the romance a little less sappy and overblown and overwrought dramatic, and made it a little bit more like rom-com style, and then still had the sordid necrophiliac stuff. You don't have to get graphic with it even. You just have to be sordid about it, and you could make this pretty fun. I would be down for a remake of this that fixed the script issues, fixed the pacing issues, interwove the romance stuff with the sordid necrophiliac stuff, and it just really kind of goes for it all. I would be down for that in a heartbeat, because this movie has good bones, if you will. It had a lot of potential, and it lost its way partway through. And again, it's the filmmaker's fault, right? The writer director, he's a novice. There's a reason why he didn't work again. It's unfortunate because they had a good idea here, and then they just fumbled it. It is what it is. Sometimes you can't win them all, I guess, But it's still worth a watch, honestly. Given all that, it's still worth a watch. I would say it's interesting enough to check it out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Love Me Deadly. Give it a chance if you're into this kind of stuff. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised with the soreness of this, and then thoroughly annoyed by the romance stuff on it. But let me know what you think if you've checked it out. And Sarah has already let me know what she thinks of it. But it's worth your time. But manage your expectations, because it is a bit of a mess of a movie in terms of tone and quality for sure. In terms of quality, I'm time to take some quality time with you to look at a horror to pursue card. It's that point in the video where I look at a card and try to answer it live on camera. And given that we're talking about necrophilia at length, let's go with the gore category on the card. Sound good? Okay, so here is the question. Name the composer who scored the music for 1982's The Thing. This is a pretty good question. And I'll explain why in a little bit. I don't want to spoil anything or give it too much away in terms of a hint, but I'm like 95 or so percent sure I know this, but I feel like it's slightly a trick question, slightly, and I'll explain that, like I said, in a little bit. But we have talked about The Thing here on the channel. It is a classic. John Carpenter directed it. It is an amazing movie. It's what I love about that movie, amongst many other things, for the syllabus purposes, is there's so many different subgenres that it kind of fits into, that you can pretty much fit it anywhere. If you think of the syllabus as a puzzle, and you're trying to fit movies to fill the entire syllabus, and you can't repeat any, The Thing is a nice one because you can kind of reserve it and fill whatever hole you haven't been able to fill before. Is it an alien movie? Is it a paranoia movie? Is it a nature and isolation movie? Is it a doppelganger movie? Like, there's a lot of different things you can put it into, and so it's got versatility in that sense. So that's one of the things I like about the movie. The other thing is it's just a great movie, great performances all around, really well paced, really well directed, great setting, great concept, amazing special effects. All of it's great, and I'm preaching to the choir. Most of you've seen this, you know this, but do you know who scored the music? Who was the composer? Do you know? Lock in an answer if you haven't already. And if you don't know, take a good guess, because it's time for me to go ahead and answer. So lock it in. You good? You ready? Okay. So my answer was gonna be John Carpenter, because John Carpenter does his own music like he did for Halloween. He's a composer as well. But I'm 95% sure it is not John Carpenter who did The Thing. I'm pretty sure it's Ennio Morricone, and I hope I'm right. Let's check the card. Ennio Morricone. I am correct. Oh, I was going to be embarrassed if I was wrong on that one, but I was pretty sure that John Carpenter was not the one who did the music for this one, although it even kind of feels like Carpenter-esque music, like if you know his vibes. So, interesting question. That was a good one. Like I said, I think the question wants you to guess John Carpenter, but you'd have been wrong. And I'm guessing a lot of you got it right, or at least, if you got it wrong, did you say John Carpenter? Did you fall for the trick of the card? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you've got any recommendations of other movies I should check out, necrophiliac or otherwise. If there's something I haven't seen before, maybe I'll do a video on it and check it out. But until then, I'll just say, class dismissed.